The cruelest people rarely realize they're creating the memory that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. The ballroom of the Whitmore Grand Hotel glowed beneath three enormous crystal chandeliers, their reflections trembling softly against polished marble floors as Manhattan's elite drifted through the charity gala in tuxedos and silk gowns worth more than most Americans made in a month. Waiters carried silver trays through the sea of laughter and expensive perfume, while a string quartet played near the staircase, the music elegant enough to hide the exhaustion behind the staff's tired eyes. Claire Bennett moved quietly between tables with the kind of grace people only noticed when it disappeared. 27 years old, pale skin, soft blonde hair tied neatly beneath a black satin ribbon, calm blue eyes that never lingered too long on anyone. She wore the same uniform as every other waitress in the ballroom, but there was something strangely composed about her, something that didn't quite belong among nervous servers rushing to impress billionaires and investors. Claire never rushed. Even during chaos, she moved like someone protecting a secret. In the pocket of her apron sat a folded cream-colored envelope, slightly worn at the edges from being carried night after night. No address, no stamp, just handwriting pressed carefully across the front in faded blue ink. The gala tonight was worth nearly $12 million in donations alone. Every major financial publication in New York was there. Cameras flashed every few seconds near the stage where Ethan Cole stood surrounded by executives and reporters, his dark navy suit perfectly tailored against his broad frame, silver cufflinks catching the chandelier light whenever he lifted his champagne glass. At 39, Ethan Cole had become one of the youngest tech billionaires in America, the kind of man magazines described as brilliant, ruthless, and impossible to read. Employees feared him. Investors admired him. The public called him visionary because success always sounded kinder when attached to wealth. Claire had served his table before. For times, technically, Ethan never remembered. Men like him rarely looked directly at the people refilling their water glasses. Table 12 needs fresh champagne. Another waitress whispered nervously while passing Claire near the kitchen doors. And be careful, that's Ethan Cole's section tonight. Claire nodded once. I know. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as Ethan stepped toward the center stage, preparing to announce the foundation's newest education initiative. Applause rolled softly across the room. Every camera turned toward him. Claire approached carefully with a silver tray balanced in one hand while guests shifted around the stage area to get closer photographs. Then it happened. A man backing away from a photographer bumped Claire's shoulder hard enough to tilt the tray. One crystal flute slipped. Champagne splashed across Ethan Cole's notes and the front of his suit jacket in a glittering burst of gold beneath the lights. The room froze. Even the violins seemed to stop breathing. Claire immediately lowered the tray. I'm so sorry, sir. Ethan stared down at the wet pages in silence first, then slowly looked up at her. His expression was not angry at first. It was worse. Cold disappointment. The kind reserved for people he considered beneath his time. A few reporters awkwardly lowered their cameras. Others kept filming. Do you have any idea what you just ruined? Ethan asked quietly. Claire reached for a napkin immediately. I can replace the papers. Replace. His laugh was short and sharp. That speech took my team 3 weeks to prepare. Claire lowered her eyes politely. I understand. Ethan took the napkin from her hand, then looked directly toward the crowd surrounding them. This, he said calmly enough for nearby tables to hear, is exactly what happens when people are hired for sympathy instead of competence. A few uncomfortable chuckles scattered through the ballroom. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around the silver tray. Nothing else moved. Ethan continued wiping champagne from his jacket while cameras captured every second. Tell me something, he said, voice smooth now. Was balancing a tray too difficult tonight? Someone near the stage laughed louder this time. Claire remained perfectly still. No, sir. Interesting. Ethan glanced toward the event manager standing frozen nearby. Because from where I'm standing, this looks pretty simple. The humiliation spread slowly through the room like smoke. Nobody interrupted him. Wealth had a way of making cruelty socially acceptable. Claire could feel dozens of eyes studying her face, waiting for tears, embarrassment, anger, anything dramatic enough to entertain the room for another few seconds before dessert service resumed. But Claire only bent down carefully to pick up the broken glass near Ethan's shoes. One piece had sliced lightly across her palm. A thin line of red appeared against her pale skin. She ignored it completely. Ethan noticed the blood before anyone else did. For half a second, something uncertain flickered across his face, then disappeared. "Leave it," he said coldly. "Someone more qualified can clean this up." The sentence landed harder than the champagne ever could. Claire slowly stood. Around them, phones continued recording. Crystal lights shimmered overhead while the orchestra resumed playing as if nothing important had happened at all. Claire looked at Ethan one final time, her expression unreadable beneath the soft ballroom light. Not angry, not broken. Somehow that made it worse. "Of course, Mr. Cole," she said softly. Then she placed the untouched champagne tray onto a nearby table, folded the stained napkin once with trembling fingers, and walked away through the crowd while hundreds of strangers silently moved aside to let her pass. Ethan watched her disappear beyond the ballroom doors without understanding why the room suddenly felt colder after she left. The rain started just after midnight, sliding down the tall glass windows of the Whitmore Grand Hotel like silver threads melting into the city below. Most of the guests had gone home hours ago. The orchestra was silent now. Workers folded white tablecloths beneath dim ballroom lights while exhausted servers stacked crystal glasses into rolling carts that squeaked softly against the marble floor. Claire Bennett stood alone near the employee lockers, carefully wrapping a small bandage around the cut on her palm. The bleeding had already stopped. Her movements were slow, precise, like someone trying not to disturb a thought too painful to touch directly. Nearby, two younger waitresses whispered while changing out of their uniforms. "I still cannot believe he said that to her in front of everybody. That video is already online. Someone posted it before dessert. If that happened to me, I would have cried." Claire quietly closed her locker door before either of them noticed she could hear every word. She did not blame them. In Manhattan, humiliation traveled faster than kindness, especially when billionaires were involved. She removed the satin ribbon from her blonde hair and slipped it into her coat pocket beside the cream-colored envelope she carried every night. The envelope looked older now, softened at the corners from being folded and unfolded too many times. Claire stared at it for a long moment before sliding it back into place. "Claire." The voice came gently from behind her. Olivia Grant, the ballroom manager, stood near the doorway holding a clipboard against her chest. Mid-50s. Elegant posture. Kind eyes hidden beneath exhaustion. She had worked enough years in luxury hospitality to recognize heartbreak before it became visible. "You should have gone home already," Olivia said quietly. Claire forced a small smile. "I still needed to finish inventory." Olivia stepped closer. "You do not owe this place anything tonight." For the first time all evening, Claire looked tired. Not angry, not devastated, just tired in the way people become when disappointment stops surprising them. "It is fine," she said softly. "People like him forget moments like that quickly." Olivia hesitated. "And people like you?" Claire glanced toward the ballroom entrance where workers were removing flower arrangements beneath fading chandelier light. "We remember them quietly." Neither woman spoke after that. Somewhere downstairs, a service elevator rattled open. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The city outside glowed cold and distant through the storm. Claire finally picked up her bag. "Good night, Olivia." "Claire." She stopped near the door. Olivia's voice lowered carefully. "You are one of the best people who has ever worked here. Do not let one cruel man rewrite how you see yourself." Claire's expression softened slightly. He did not rewrite anything. Then she left. Outside, Manhattan smelled like rain and wet concrete. Taxi lights reflected across dark streets while steam drifted upward from subway grates into the cold October air. Claire walked 3 blocks before stopping beneath the awning of a closed bookstore. She pulled the cream-colored envelope from her coat pocket again. Her fingers traced the handwriting slowly. Then she opened it. Inside was a single folded page covered in careful blue ink. Not rushed, not emotional, thoughtful, deliberate. The kind of writing that came from someone who had spent years learning how to hide pain behind calm sentences. Claire read one line silently before closing her eyes. "I kept hoping powerful people were only lonely, not cruel." Her throat tightened slightly. She folded the letter again before the rain could touch the paper. Across town, Ethan Cole stood alone inside the penthouse office of Cole Technologies on the 42nd floor overlooking the Hudson River. The city glittered beneath him like something expensive and untouchable. His soaked speech pages sat crumpled near the edge of his desk, beside untouched whiskey. A television screen mounted against the wall replayed clips from the gala with muted captions scrolling beneath financial headlines. Ethan loosened his tie impatiently while scrolling through emails on his phone. Investor concerns, public relations updates, donation figures. Then another notification appeared. Someone had uploaded the ballroom incident. Already 3 million views. Ethan watched the video once without sound. Claire standing motionless beneath crystal lights while cameras flashed around her. His own expression colder than he remembered. He almost closed the clip immediately. But something stopped him. Claire never defended herself. That was the part that unsettled him now. Most people argued, cried, became emotional. She had simply stood there holding broken glass in her bleeding hand while he embarrassed her in front of strangers. Ethan leaned back slowly. Rain brushed softly against the office windows behind him. For reasons he could not explain, he suddenly remembered her eyes. Calm, steady, not fearful, not hateful, just disappointed. The realization irritated him immediately. He pressed the phone face down against the desk. Ridiculous, he muttered under his breath. Yet 30 minutes later, while the city darkened beneath the storm, Ethan still had not turned the video off. Morning arrived gray and cold over Manhattan, the kind of October morning that made the city feel quieter than usual. Rainwater still clung to the sidewalks outside Cole Technologies, while black sedans lined the curb beneath the glass tower, like polished shadows waiting for instructions. Inside the executive conference room on the 42nd floor, investors argued softly over acquisition reports projected onto massive digital screens. Numbers moved. Markets shifted. Coffee steamed from white porcelain cups worth more than an average family grocery bill. Ethan Cole sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable beneath the pale light pouring through the windows behind him. Usually, this was where he felt strongest. Control lived here. Precision. Predictability. But today his attention drifted every few minutes toward the reflection of the rain-streaked skyline behind the investors speaking to him. The board wants a public statement before noon, his chief legal advisor said carefully. The video is spreading faster than expected. Ethan barely looked up from the financial report in front of him. People will forget it by tomorrow. Normally, yes, another executive replied. But the public reaction is unusual this time. Ethan finally lifted his eyes. Unusual how? The executive hesitated before sliding a tablet across the table. Ethan glanced down. Thousands of comments flooded beneath the gala footage online. Not outrage exactly. Something quieter. More personal. She looked heartbroken. The way she stayed calm made it worse. Why does she seem more dignified than the billionaire humiliating her? Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He pushed the tablet aside. We are discussing a technology merger worth $600 million. Not internet comments. Silence settled briefly around the table. Nobody challenged him. They rarely did. Ethan had built his empire by being decisive before others even understood the risk. 10 years earlier, he had been called brilliant for firing entire divisions overnight to save collapsing companies. Investors admired efficiency when they profited from it. Compassion did not appear on quarterly reports. Still, as the meeting continued, Ethan found himself distracted by details he should not have remembered. Claire's trembling hand, the folded napkin, the way she never once defended herself. By noon, the rain had stopped. Sunlight reflected sharply against nearby skyscrapers while reporters gathered outside the building entrance hoping for comments Ethan had no intention of giving. He walked through the executive hallway with controlled confidence, expensive shoes silent against dark hardwood floors. Assistants moved quickly around him carrying schedules and contracts, while digital clocks glowed softly along the walls. His personal assistant, Daniel Reeves, hurried beside him holding a tablet. Your interview with Forbes has been postponed until next week. Ethan nodded once. Fine. Also, Daniel hesitated carefully. The Whitmore Grand called this morning. Ethan kept walking. About what? The waitress. Something in Ethan's expression cooled instantly. What about her? Apparently, she did not show up for her shift today. Ethan said nothing. Daniel continued cautiously. Olivia Grant mentioned she has never missed work before. They reached Ethan's office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Hudson River beneath pale afternoon light, while the city stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Ethan loosened his cufflinks slowly. Why are they informing me about employee attendance? Daniel shifted awkwardly. I think they assumed after last night. Ethan turned toward the window before Daniel could finish. People leave jobs every day. Of course. Anything else? Daniel lowered the tablet slightly. No, sir. The office doors closed softly behind him. Ethan stood alone again. Below the tower, traffic crawled through Manhattan like streams of light beneath cold skies. Somewhere far below, people hurried toward trains and coffee shops and ordinary lives untouched by billion-dollar headlines. Ethan rarely thought about ordinary people unless they worked for him. Yet sometime around 3 in the afternoon, while reviewing acquisition contracts, he caught himself wondering where Claire Bennett lived. The thought irritated him immediately. He closed the document harder than necessary. On the other side of the city, Claire sat quietly beside the window of a small apartment in Brooklyn with a ceramic mug warming her hands. The apartment was modest but clean. Books stacked neatly beside the couch. A single lamp glowing softly near the kitchen counter. Rain clouds drifted slowly beyond the fire escape outside her window, while jazz music played faintly from an old radio. Claire wore an oversized cream sweater now instead of the black ballroom uniform. Her blonde hair rested loosely over one shoulder while she stared at a blank page inside a worn leather notebook. For nearly 10 minutes, she did not write anything. Then finally, slowly, she pressed pen to paper. There is a strange loneliness inside people who are admired by everyone. She paused. The city hummed softly outside. Sirens in the distance. Footsteps above her ceiling. Somewhere nearby, a couple laughed while walking down the street. Claire continued writing. The world mistakes power for strength so often that some people forget kindness is also a form of discipline. Her hand stopped again. Quiet filled the apartment. Then her phone vibrated gently against the table. Olivia Grant's name appeared across the screen. Claire answered softly. Hello. Claire, Olivia said carefully. I just wanted to make sure you are all right. Claire looked toward the rain-streaked window. I am fine. You are not coming back, are you? A long silence followed. Then Claire smiled faintly to herself. No, Olivia sounded sad rather than surprised. I thought so. Claire closed the notebook slowly. Some places only notice your humanity after they embarrass it. Across Manhattan, Ethan Cole sat alone in his office hours later while the skyline turned gold beneath the setting sun. His computer screen glowed with contracts awaiting signatures. His phone buzzed endlessly beside untouched coffee gone cold hours ago. Yet for reasons he could not explain, he suddenly remembered one sentence from the comments beneath the video. She looked disappointed in him. Ethan leaned back slowly in his chair. Outside the window, the city darkened. And for the first time in years, the silence inside his office felt heavier than success. 3 days later, the video still had not disappeared. In fact, it seemed to grow quieter and heavier as more people watched it. The internet had moved beyond outrage now. Strangers were no longer debating whether Ethan Cole had behaved badly. They were studying Claire Bennett instead. Her stillness, her restraint, the way she folded the napkin with shaking fingers while preserving what little dignity remained inside a room designed to impress wealthy people. Some called her graceful. Others called her heartbreaking. Ethan avoided reading any of it. Yet somehow every conversation around him carried traces of the incident anyway. Public perception matters. The board is concerned about empathy metrics. People connect emotionally to stories like this. Stories Ethan hated when real life became public entertainment. By Thursday evening, Manhattan was colder. Wind curled between skyscrapers while headlights reflected across wet avenues beneath darkening skies. Ethan arrived at another fundraising event downtown, this one hosted inside a modern art museum overlooking the East River. Glass walls surrounded the enormous reception hall, while string lights glowed softly above hundreds of carefully dressed guests balancing champagne flutes and rehearsed smiles. Everything looked beautiful. Everything felt empty. Ethan stepped through the crowd with practiced confidence, while photographers called his name from behind velvet ropes. Investors shook his hand. Politicians complimented his latest education initiative. Someone laughed too loudly beside him about stock prices. Yet beneath the noise, Ethan noticed something strange. Service staff avoided eye contact with him tonight. Not openly disrespectful, just distant. Careful. like people instinctively protecting themselves from embarrassment before it arrived. The realization irritated him more than it should have. Halfway through the evening, Ethan walked toward the bar near the museum terrace. A young waitress with dark hair approached carrying sparkling water. Her hand trembled slightly when she recognized him. Ethan noticed immediately. "Relax," he said flatly. "I'm not going to humiliate you." The waitress froze. Her face turned pale with embarrassment. "I am sorry, sir. I did not mean." "Forget it." Ethan took the glass and turned away before she could finish. But the damage had already settled inside him. For the first time, he understood what people expected from him now. Cruelty had become part of his reputation faster than success ever had. Outside on the museum terrace, wind swept across the river while Manhattan glowed behind drifting clouds. Ethan loosened his tie slightly and stared toward the skyline. The city looked endless from here. Millions of people stacked inside towers of light and silence. Somewhere among them, Claire Bennett was continuing her life without him. The thought should not have mattered, yet it lingered anyway. Beautiful view, isn't it? Ethan turned slightly. An older man stood nearby holding a whiskey glass beneath the terrace lights. Gray hair, warm eyes, expensive coat worn casually rather than proudly. Senator Richard Hale, one of the event sponsors. Ethan nodded politely. "It is." The senator studied him quietly for a moment before speaking again. "I saw the video." Ethan's expression cooled immediately. "I assumed everyone had. That girl handled herself with remarkable dignity." Ethan stared back toward the river. People online seem very invested in a stranger they have never met. Maybe because she reminded them of someone. Ethan said nothing. Wind brushed softly against the terrace railing while music drifted faintly from inside the museum. Senator Hale continued carefully. "You know, power reveals people differently than failure does." Ethan glanced toward him. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Failure humbles you publicly. Power humbles you privately." The older man sipped his drink calmly. "Most successful men spend their lives thinking they are feared because they are strong." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "And what do you think?" "I think fear and respect look similar from far away." Silence settled between them. Somewhere below the terrace, horns echoed through Manhattan traffic while cold air carried the scent of rain moving back into the city again. Ethan finally spoke. "You are assuming you understand me from one moment." Senator Hale smiled faintly. "No, I am assuming that if a moment follows you around this long, it probably touched something true." The word stayed with Ethan long after the senator walked away. Later that night, after the museum emptied and the city darkened beneath rain clouds again, Ethan returned to his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The apartment was enormous, modern, immaculate, and unbearably quiet. A cleaning service kept everything perfect. No family photographs, no clutter, no signs of anyone truly living there besides expensive furniture and untouched wine bottles. Ethan loosened his coat near the kitchen counter and noticed his housekeeper had left fresh coffee beside neatly folded newspapers. One headline immediately caught his attention. Tech billionaire faces online backlash after charity gala incident. Ethan folded the paper shut instantly. Yet a smaller article beneath the headline lingered in his mind anyway. Public response intensified after viewers praised the waitress for remaining calm despite visible humiliation. Visible humiliation. Ethan poured coffee into a black ceramic mug and suddenly remembered Claire standing beneath crystal chandeliers with blood on her palm while guests watched silently around her. He remembered the way she said, "Of course, Mr. Cole," as though she pitied him more than feared him. Ethan sat near the window overlooking the park while rain began tapping softly against the glass again. His coffee cooled untouched beside him. Then something unexpected happened. For the first time since the gala, Ethan wondered what Claire Bennett might have written inside that cream-colored envelope she always carried. The following Monday, Manhattan woke beneath low gray clouds and the sharp smell of approaching winter. Steam curled upward from subway grates while thousands of strangers hurried through crowded sidewalks carrying coffee cups and unfinished conversations into another workweek. Inside the Whitmore Grand Hotel, breakfast service moved quietly beneath golden chandeliers and polished mirrors that reflected tired employees pretending not to notice one empty space near the service station. Claire Bennett's locker remained untouched. Her black apron still hung neatly inside beside a small silver pen and an employee name tag no one had removed yet. Olivia Grant stood alone in the staff hallway staring at it longer than she intended to. Something about the silence around Claire's absence unsettled the hotel more than any dramatic resignation could have. Claire had not yelled, had not threatened lawsuits, had not posted emotional interviews online. She had simply disappeared from the place as quietly as she had once entered it. Sometimes silence left the deepest mark. Olivia sighed softly before unlocking the employee office. Inside, stacks of schedules and invoices covered the desk beneath warm fluorescent light. A single cream-colored envelope rested near the keyboard exactly where Claire had left it 3 nights earlier. No name written outside. No explanation attached. Olivia picked it up carefully. The paper felt soft from being handled many times before. She remembered Claire standing silently near the service hallway after the gala ended, eyes tired but calm. "If Mr. Cole ever asks about me," Claire had said softly, "please give him this." Olivia had almost replied that men like Ethan Cole never asked about waitresses after embarrassing them publicly. But something in Claire's expression stopped her. Not hope, not anger, just acceptance. Before Olivia could decide what to do with the envelope now, her office phone rang sharply. "Whitmore Management," she answered. "Olivia," Daniel Reeves said from the other end. Ethan's assistant sounded unusually hesitant. "Mr. Cole will be attending tonight's donor dinner at the hotel." Olivia's posture stiffened slightly. "I see. He requested the same private ballroom setup as last week." A long silence followed. Then Olivia asked quietly, "Did he request the same waitress too?" Daniel hesitated. "No." Yet somehow the answer felt incomplete. Across Manhattan, Ethan Cole sat inside the back seat of a black sedan moving slowly through morning traffic while digital stock reports glowed across the tablet in his hands. Normally, he reviewed every detail before arriving at the office. Today, he barely absorbed any of it. His driver turned onto Fifth Avenue while cold rain streaked softly against the windows. Ethan stared absently at pedestrians crossing intersections beneath umbrellas. Ordinary people. Anonymous lives. For years, he had considered anonymity a weakness. Yet recently, he had begun to suspect it might actually be freedom. His phone buzzed beside him. Daniel's message appeared across the screen. "Whitmore confirmed tonight's reservation." Ethan typed a brief response. "Fine," then paused before adding another sentence. "Is the waitress still employed there?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then returned. Finally, Daniel replied carefully. "Claire Bennett resigned Friday morning." Ethan stared at the message longer than necessary. Something hollow shifted quietly inside his chest before he pushed the feeling away. People leave jobs every day. Yet he still opened the internet an hour later and searched her name anyway. Nothing appeared beyond reposted clips from the gala. No social media interviews. No public statements. No fundraising campaigns exploiting sympathy. Just silence. Ethan frowned slightly. Most people used humiliation as leverage now. Attention had become its own currency. But Claire Bennett had vanished instead. By evening, rain covered Manhattan again in silver reflections and blurred headlights. The Whitmore Grand prepared another luxury dinner for investors and political donors, while servers moved carefully through candlelit tables dressed in black uniforms identical to the one Claire once wore. Ethan arrived exactly at 7:30. Conversations softened slightly when guests noticed him entering the ballroom. Some smiled too quickly. Others looked away. Ethan ignored all of it. Halfway through dinner, while a jazz pianist played softly near the marble staircase, Ethan noticed something small near the edge of the room. A waitress carrying wine had folded napkins exactly the way Claire had. Precise corners. Gentle movements. The realization irritated him unexpectedly. He set his glass down harder than intended. Olivia approached moments later. "Good evening, Mr. Cole." Ethan nodded politely. "Olivia." She studied him carefully for a moment beneath the warm ballroom lights. "You seem distracted tonight." "I am fine." "Of course." She glanced briefly toward the empty service station near the back hallway. Some absences changed the atmosphere of a place. Ethan followed her gaze instinctively before catching himself. "Your staff appears capable enough." Olivia's expression remained calm. Competence and presence are not always the same thing. Ethan looked away first. Music drifted softly through the ballroom, while candlelight flickered against crystal glasses. Finally, Olivia reached into the pocket of her blazer and placed the cream-colored envelope carefully beside Ethan's untouched coffee cup. His eyes immediately recognized it. "What is this?" Olivia answered quietly. "She left it for you." Ethan stared at the envelope without touching it. The paper looked older under the ballroom light than he remembered. Softer somehow. Human. When the night she resigned, Ethan's fingers rested motionless beside the table. "Why did you wait until now?" Olivia held his gaze steadily. "Because some people only read important things after silence becomes loud enough." Then she walked away before he could respond. Ethan remained seated alone while conversations continued around him in polished voices beneath chandeliers glowing gold overhead. The envelope sat beside his coffee untouched. Across the front, written carefully in faded blue ink, were 4 simple words. Not addressed to Ethan Cole. Not addressed to anyone. Just a sentence written like a quiet confession. "For the days I disappeared." The ballroom slowly emptied around Ethan Cole, but he remained seated beneath the chandelier light long after the final dessert plates disappeared from the tables. The cream-colored envelope rested untouched beside his coffee cup, while waiters quietly cleared silverware in the distance. Jazz music had stopped almost 20 minutes earlier. Now only the soft sounds of glassware and distant footsteps echoed through the enormous room. Ethan stared at the handwriting again. "For the days I disappeared." Something about the sentence unsettled him more than anger would have. It did not sound dramatic. It sounded tired, honest, human. Finally, after several long minutes, he picked up the envelope carefully. The paper felt delicate in his hands, softened by time, and carried memories. Ethan rarely touched anything handwritten anymore. His world existed inside contracts, digital signatures, market forecasts, and polished presentations created by assistants who knew exactly what he wanted before he asked. But this felt different, personal in a way that made him strangely uncomfortable. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside sat several folded pages written neatly in blue ink. No perfume, no emotional outbursts, no accusations. Just calm handwriting stretching carefully across cream-colored paper beneath the warm ballroom light. Ethan unfolded the first page. The room around him seemed to quiet instantly. Some humiliations are loud. Others arrive politely. Ethan's eyes moved slower now. "I used to believe embarrassment only hurt when people laughed. I was wrong. Sometimes the cruelest moments happen when a room becomes silent because everyone suddenly realizes you are alone." Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. Across the ballroom, staff members lowered lights one section at a time while shadows softened along the marble floor. He kept reading. "You probably do not remember the first time we met. Powerful people rarely remember ordinary ones. But I remembered you." Ethan frowned faintly. The sentence stirred something distant in his memory, though he could not place it yet. His gaze continued downward. 3 years ago, your company hosted a literacy fundraiser in Brooklyn. I was there because my professor asked graduate students to volunteer. You arrived late. Everyone stood when you entered the room. Everyone except an elderly janitor carrying coffee near the back hallway. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly against the paper. Suddenly, faintly, he remembered. An overcrowded community center. Flashing cameras. Politicians. Applause. And somewhere in the background, an old janitor accidentally dropping coffee near his shoes before apologizing repeatedly in front of reporters. Ethan had forgotten the man immediately afterward. Claire had not. The janitor kept apologizing while trying to clean the floor. He looked terrified, not because of the coffee, because humiliation changes people physically. Their hands shake. Their shoulders fold inward. Their voice disappears. Ethan swallowed once. Outside the ballroom windows, rain drifted softly across Manhattan again. You told him to be more careful next time because accidents make people look incompetent. Everyone laughed politely, including me. Ethan stared motionless at the page. I laughed because I was young enough to believe silence protected people from becoming targets. Later that night, I saw the janitor crying alone near the service entrance while trying to clean his uniform before taking the subway home. Ethan stopped reading for several seconds. The ballroom lights dimmed again automatically. Shadows deepened across the empty tables around him. Somewhere near the kitchen hallway, silver trays clinked softly together. Ethan suddenly remembered the old man's face clearly now. Tired eyes, gray hair, trembling hands. He remembered nothing else about him. Claire's words continued quietly across the page. That was the first moment I realized powerful people sometimes wound others without noticing because success teaches them to mistake fear for respect. Ethan looked away from the letter toward the dark ballroom windows. His own reflection stared back at him beneath chandelier light. Expensive suit. Controlled expression. A man the world admired because admiration was easier than understanding. Slowly, Ethan lowered his eyes back to the page. I carried this letter for almost a year before writing anything inside it. Not because I hated you. Strangely, I never did. I think I kept hoping there was sadness beneath your arrogance instead of cruelty. The sentence landed harder than any public accusation could have. Ethan exhaled quietly through his nose. For reasons he could not explain, he suddenly felt exhausted. Then last week happened, and I realized something difficult. People who are publicly humiliated remember every detail. The room temperature, the sound of glasses, the exact moment strangers stop seeing them as human beings and start seeing them as entertainment. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Claire's handwriting remained calm even there. No bitterness, no revenge. Somehow that hurt more. The strange thing is this. I do not think you are evil. I think you are lonely in a way wealth cannot fix. I think somewhere along the way, success taught you that softness was weakness and that kindness was something ordinary people practiced because they lacked power. Ethan slowly closed his eyes for one brief second. The ballroom had become almost completely dark now except for the chandelier above his table. When he opened his eyes again, he noticed his untouched coffee had gone cold hours ago. Claire's final sentence on the page waited quietly beneath the fading light. But kindness is not weakness, Mr. Cole. Sometimes it is the most disciplined form of strength a person can have. Ethan lowered the letter carefully onto the table. Rain whispered softly against the windows beyond him, while the empty ballroom stretched silent and gold beneath dim chandeliers. And for the first time in many years, Ethan Cole felt ashamed in a way success could not silence. The rain had stopped by the time Ethan Cole finally left the Whitmore Grand, but the city still looked washed in silver beneath the midnight lights of Manhattan. His driver opened the sedan door without speaking. Ethan entered silently, the cream-colored letter resting beside him on the leather seat, like something fragile enough to break if touched too roughly. During the entire drive home, he did not open his phone once. No market reports. No investor messages. No headlines. Just silence and the faint reflection of city lights sliding across the window beside him. Back at the penthouse, the apartment felt colder than usual. Ethan loosened his coat slowly and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Rainwater still clung to the glass while traffic lights glowed faintly below like distant embers. He poured himself coffee out of habit before realizing he did not actually want it. The mug remained untouched on the marble counter while he unfolded the second page of Claire's letter beneath the kitchen light. Her handwriting stayed calm. Careful, beautiful in a quiet way. I think loneliness changes powerful people differently than ordinary ones. Ethan read slowly now. Most lonely people become softer. They search for connection. But some wealthy people become colder because success allows them to avoid vulnerability entirely. Ethan leaned against the counter, eyes fixed on the page. You can replace employees. Replace cities. Replace relationships. Replace mistakes with money before consequences ever arrive. Eventually, people stop telling you the truth because your comfort becomes more important than honesty. Somewhere beyond the windows, thunder rolled faintly above the city. Ethan continued reading. I noticed it the first night I served your table. Everyone around you monitored your mood like weather patterns. They laughed before you finished jokes. They agreed before you finished opinions. Nobody spoke naturally near you. Ethan exhaled quietly through his nose. The observation unsettled him because it was true. He had simply stopped noticing years ago. Claire's words moved gently across the page. You looked exhausted that night. Not physically, spiritually, like someone who had achieved everything except peace. Ethan lowered the paper slightly. The penthouse remained silent except for rainwater dripping softly outside the windows. For a moment, he remembered something strange from childhood. His father standing silently beside him at 13 years old after Ethan won a statewide academic competition. No celebration, no pride, just a hand on his shoulder and one sentence spoken quietly into the dark kitchen. Do not let people see weakness, Ethan. They will use it against you. Ethan had obeyed those words his entire life. until eventually, he no longer knew the difference between strength and distance. He returned to the letter. The saddest part is this. I do not think you humiliate people because you enjoy cruelty. I think you humiliate people because somewhere along the way, empathy started feeling inconvenient. Ethan stared at the sentence motionless. His coffee sat cooling untouched nearby. People with power often believe emotional restraint makes them intelligent. But sometimes restraint is simply fear wearing expensive clothing. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. For reasons he could not explain, the line hurt more than the public backlash ever had. His entire identity had been built around control, precision, distance. Yet Claire described him with terrifying accuracy, using nothing except calm handwriting on cream-colored paper. He unfolded the next page slowly. Do you know what I remember most about that night at the gala? Ethan's eyes moved downward. Not the humiliation, not the cameras, not even the laughter. His grip tightened slightly against the edge of the paper. I remember realizing that no one at your table looked surprised by your behavior. Silence filled the penthouse again. Somewhere deep inside the building, an elevator hummed softly through the floors. Ethan suddenly felt older than 39. That frightened me more than the embarrassment itself. Ethan walked slowly toward the windows while continuing to read beneath the soft city glow. Because it meant cruelty had become normal around you. And people rarely notice darkness after living beside it long enough. Outside, Manhattan stretched endlessly beneath silver clouds and distant sirens. Millions of strangers moving through their own private griefs, while towers of glass reflected cold light into the night. Ethan stared down at the city for a long moment before reading the final paragraph on the page. I hope someday someone speaks honestly to you before loneliness becomes the only language left in your life. Ethan lowered the paper slowly. The words settled into the silence around him with unbearable gentleness. Not revenge, not hatred, concern. Somehow concern felt harder to survive. He walked back toward the kitchen counter and noticed something unusual near the bottom of the final page. A small handwritten date. October 14th. 3 months earlier. Ethan frowned faintly. Claire had started writing this long before the gala happened. Long before public humiliation. Long before cameras and headlines. Which meant something even more unsettling. She had understood him before he ever noticed her existence at all. Ethan stood motionless beside the window while rain clouds drifted slowly over Central Park beneath the midnight skyline. Then quietly, almost without realizing it, he whispered the first honest thing he had said in years. "Who are you, Claire Bennett?" But only the silence answered him. The next morning arrived pale and windless over Manhattan, the kind of cold October dawn that made the city look almost fragile beneath washed-out skies. Ethan Cole had not slept. The untouched coffee from the night before still sat near the kitchen counter beside Claire Bennett's unfolded letter, while faint morning light spilled through the massive penthouse windows overlooking Central Park. At 6:30, Ethan stood alone in a charcoal overcoat staring down at the city below. For years, mornings had felt efficient to him. Predictable. Structured. Today felt different. Heavy in a way numbers could not solve. His phone buzzed repeatedly on the marble counter behind him. Meetings. Investor calls. Interviews. He ignored every notification. Then finally, he picked up the cream-colored pages again and noticed something tucked carefully between the folds near the back. A receipt. Old. Slightly faded. Ethan turned it over slowly. Brooklyn Public Library Cafe. 2 years earlier. On the back, written in Claire's calm handwriting, sat a single sentence. You looked happier before everyone started admiring you. Ethan stared at the words for several seconds before something shifted faintly in his memory. A small cafe beside a library in Brooklyn Heights. Rain outside. No security team. No press. Just a younger version of himself sitting alone with coffee after speaking at a university event nearby. He had gone there because nobody recognized him yet. Because success had still felt new enough to enjoy quietly. Ethan suddenly remembered a blonde woman sitting near the window reading a novel while jazz music played softly through the cafe speakers. Claire. She had been there long before the gala. Long before the hotel. Watching him without him ever noticing. The realization unsettled him deeply. By 9 in the morning, Ethan canceled his entire schedule. Daniel Reeves looked genuinely alarmed standing inside the executive office. You are missing the merger conference call. Ethan buttoned his coat slowly. Reschedule it. Sir, The board is already concerned about Daniel. Ethan's voice stayed calm, but something inside it felt different now. Less sharp, more tired. Do you know where Claire Bennett lives? Daniel blinked in surprise. I can find out. Ethan looked toward the skyline beyond the office windows. Please do. 2 hours later, a black sedan pulled quietly into a narrow Brooklyn street lined with old brick apartment buildings and small coffee shops preparing for the lunch rush. Fallen leaves skittered across the sidewalk beneath cold wind, while strangers hurried past carrying groceries and paper cups. Ethan stepped from the car alone. No assistant. No security detail. Just silence and the folded letter inside his coat pocket. The apartment building looked ordinary. Faded green awning. Buzzers near the entrance. A florist beside the laundromat downstairs. Ethan stood there for several seconds before finally climbing the narrow staircase to apartment 4B. He knocked once. No answer. Again. Silence. Then slowly, the door across the hallway opened a few inches. An elderly woman with silver hair studied him carefully over reading glasses. You looking for Claire? Ethan nodded once. Yes. The woman sighed softly. You are late. The words landed harder than Ethan expected. Do you know where she went? No. The woman opened the door slightly wider. She moved out 3 days ago. Ethan glanced toward the quiet apartment door again. Did she say anything? The woman studied him for a long moment before answering. Only that she needed somewhere people did not mistake kindness for weakness anymore. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. Somewhere downstairs, a bell above the building entrance jingled softly as someone entered from the street. Did she leave a forwarding address? No. The woman hesitated carefully. But she left something outside the night she moved. Ethan frowned faintly. The elderly woman pointed toward the fire escape window at the end of the hallway. Still there, I think. Ethan walked slowly toward the narrow window overlooking the alley below. Resting beside the fire escape railing sat a small ceramic coffee mug and a worn hardcover book with pages bent softly from being read too many times. Ethan recognized the book immediately. The same novel Claire had carried inside the hotel break room between shifts. He carefully picked it up. Inside the front cover, written in blue ink beneath soft underlined passages, was a sentence that made his chest tighten quietly. The right people make you feel seen. The wrong ones make you feel small. Ethan closed the book slowly. Cold wind drifted through the cracked hallway window while Brooklyn traffic murmured faintly below. The elderly neighbor spoke gently behind him. She was very kind, you know. Ethan did not trust himself to answer immediately. I know. She used to bring groceries upstairs for me every Thursday after work. The woman smiled sadly. Never mentioned it to anyone. Ethan stared at the empty apartment door again. Somewhere inside him, something painful began unfolding quietly. Not guilt exactly. Something deeper. The realization that Claire Bennett had understood humanity better than he ever had despite possessing none of his power. He looked down at the ceramic mug still resting beside the window. A thin crack ran along one side, carefully repaired with gold lacquer instead of hidden. Ethan touched it lightly with his fingertips. Then he noticed tiny handwriting painted beneath the handle. Broken things are still worthy of care. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Outside, wind carried fallen leaves through the Brooklyn street, while distant church bells echoed softly somewhere beyond the city blocks. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole realized success had taught him how to build empires while quietly forgetting how to recognize goodness standing directly in front of him. Winter arrived early that year in Manhattan. By mid-November, cold wind swept through the avenues hard enough to send leaves spiraling between taxi lights and steaming subway grates, while holiday decorations slowly appeared across storefront windows downtown. The city looked beautiful from far away. Up close, it still moved too quickly to notice loneliness. Nearly 6 weeks had passed since Claire Bennett disappeared from the Whitmore Grand Hotel. 6 weeks since Ethan Cole stood beneath crystal chandeliers and watched a quiet waitress walk away with more dignity than anyone else in the room. Yet somehow, her absence remained louder than most people's presence ever had. Ethan still carried the cream-colored letter inside his coat pocket almost every day, folded carefully now, softened further at the edges. Some nights, he reread sections of it, while sitting alone beside the penthouse windows overlooking Central Park. Other nights, he simply stared at the skyline in silence, hearing Claire's words echo quietly through rooms too expensive to feel warm. The strangest part was not the guilt. It was the clarity that followed it. Ethan had spent years believing power meant control. But Claire had revealed something terrifyingly simple instead. A person could own skyscrapers and still fail at being human. On the first Monday of December, Cole Technologies hosted its annual holiday charity gala inside the same ballroom at the Whitmore Grand. The chandeliers glowed exactly as they had the night everything changed. Crystal glasses reflected gold light across polished marble floors, while photographers gathered near the entrance waiting for billionaires and politicians to smile at one another for cameras. But this year, something felt different before the evening even began. Ethan arrived early. Alone. No press interviews. No dramatic entrance. Staff members straightened nervously when they noticed him walking through the ballroom. But the usual fear in their eyes seemed mixed now with uncertainty. Ethan noticed it immediately. He also noticed something else. Several servers looked exhausted. One young waiter rubbed his shoulder while carrying trays heavier than he should have managed alone. Another waitress stood near the kitchen hallway, trying discreetly to hide tears after a guest complained harshly about spilled water. Ethan watched quietly for a moment beneath the chandelier light. Then he walked toward the service station himself. Conversations softened around the ballroom as guests realized the billionaire CEO had stepped away from investors and reporters. The young waitress near the hallway froze when Ethan approached. "I am sorry, sir," she whispered automatically. "I will fix it immediately." Ethan looked at the trembling glass in her hand before speaking softly. "You do not need to apologize for being human." The waitress blinked in surprise. Nearby staff members exchanged confused glances. Ethan took the tray gently from her hands before she could protest. Then, without announcement or cameras or speeches, he carried it himself toward table 7, where wealthy donors sat discussing market forecasts beneath candlelight. Silence spread slowly through the room as people noticed. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others simply stared. Ethan placed the glasses down calmly beside the table before returning the empty tray to the stunned waitress near the hallway. "Thank you," he said quietly. Her eyes widened slightly. "Of course, Mr. Cole." But this time the sentence sounded different. Not fearful, just surprised. Later that evening, while snow began falling softly beyond the ballroom windows, Ethan stepped onto the small stage near the center of the gala. The room quieted immediately. Investors expected another polished speech about innovation and philanthropy. Ethan stood beneath the chandelier light for several long seconds before speaking. "For most of my life," he said calmly, "I believed respect was something people owed successful men." The room remained perfectly silent. "I was wrong." A few reporters lowered their cameras slightly. Ethan continued, "Real respect cannot be demanded through wealth or power. It is earned quietly through the way we treat people who cannot benefit us." Somewhere near the back hallway, Olivia Grant stood motionless beside the service doors listening carefully. Ethan's gaze drifted briefly across the ballroom before returning forward again. "Several weeks ago, someone I failed to respect taught me something I should have learned years earlier." His voice stayed steady, but softer now. "Kindness is not weakness, and humiliation lasts far longer than pride." The room felt different after that. Quieter. More honest somehow. Ethan finished the speech without applause at first. Then slowly, gently, people began clapping. Not the loud artificial applause investors usually offered billionaires. Something warmer. More human. After the gala ended and guests disappeared into the snowy Manhattan night, Ethan remained alone inside the empty ballroom. Staff members cleaned tables quietly around him while soft jazz music played near the staircase again. Olivia approached slowly carrying a small cardboard box. "This arrived for you yesterday," she said. Ethan frowned faintly. "From who?" Olivia smiled sadly. "No return address." Ethan opened the box carefully beneath the fading chandelier light. Inside rested a ceramic coffee mug repaired with thin gold lacquer across one side. The same cracked mug Claire had left beside the fire escape window in Brooklyn. Beneath it sat one final folded note written in familiar blue ink. Ethan unfolded it slowly. "The right people do not change because they are shamed. They change because they finally choose to see others clearly." Ethan read the sentence twice beneath the soft golden light. Then quietly, almost invisibly, he smiled for the first time in weeks. Outside, snow drifted gently across Manhattan while strangers hurried home through glowing city streets. And somewhere beyond the noise and wealth and endless lights, Ethan Cole finally understood the lesson Claire Bennett had tried to teach him all along. The quiet ones were never truly ordinary.